The 2024 Paladin has now been revealed, and with it comes a bit of a mixed bag of both good and bad. Overall, I do think the class is generally improved over the version that we had in 2014, but that was already a very powerful class. So as a result, it feels like many of the changes made to the Paladin in the 2024 Player's Handbook have been tempered to make it so that they all combine to make a class that feels better and allows more features to feel usable, but that does come at the expense of some of the more powerful features that it previously had. I think they did this intentionally to shrink the delta between the Paladin and some of the other classes, like the Fighter, which we also recently saw, so there wasn't as stark of a power gap between them. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about the 2024 Paladin. And if you'd like to help support me on my quest of reaching 10,000 subscribers by the time that the 2024 Player's Handbook comes out in September, a sub to the channel would really mean a lot. Thanks. First up is Lay on Hands, which is now a bonus action to use. Pay attention to that. Bonus actions will be something of a theme throughout this discussion, and we'll circle back to it at the end. The first noteworthy change to the class comes right away at first level. Now, the Paladin immediately gets access to spellcasting, instead of having to wait until second level like they did in the 2014 version. This has a few key benefits. Firstly, it means that the player will get to experience spellcasting earlier and all of the benefits that it has, but funnily enough, it also means that they will technically be able to cast Divine Smite right away, as well at first level, because it has now been changed to a first level spell, despite still gaining the Paladin Smite feature at second level. So let's talk about Smite. The Divine Smite feature from 2014 is no more. Instead, it's been replaced by Paladin Smite, which has also seen a significant change from the Unearthed Arcana process. Now, when you get access to Paladin Smite, you are essentially given the Divine Smite spell always prepared, and you're able to cast it once per day without expending a spell slot. This does mean that whenever you cast Divine Smite for free using the benefit of the Paladin Smite feature, that it will always be cast at the lowest level. So assuming there is no significant change to the Divine Smite spell itself, let's take a look at it. Divine Smite is now a first level spell that requires your bonus action to cast and triggers immediately after hitting a target with a melee weapon or an unarmed strike. The damage output of the spell is still functionally the same as the 2014 feature. That being that it still deals 2d8 radiant damage, plus an additional 1d8 damage if the target is a fiend or undead. If you upcast a spell, you deal an additional 1d8 per slot level above first. I know that many people were very curious about what would happen with Smite and whether it would remain as a spell or not, and clearly the answer is yes, it will. Smite being gated behind your bonus action has significant implications for its potential power as well, as it means that you can only do it once per turn and also not as a reaction during an opportunity attack. This means that it's no longer possible to go full Nova as it was in the 2014 version of the class. Now, here's my hot take. I'm okay with this. I know I'll be taking some heat for that perspective, but I'm okay with it because what this change means is that the Paladin will be given more of an opportunity to use their spell slots to cast other spells, and not just purely burn them for Divine Smite. And yes, I know that's an oversimplification. I know that people weren't exclusively using their spell slots for Divine Smite, but I mean, they were often jokingly called Smite slots for a reason. Yes, it's less powerful than before, and yes, it gives Paladins a lower damage potential output than before, but I think the overall positives outweigh the negatives here. Not only does it allow the class to better utilize some of their other features, but it also helps to bring the overall power of the class more in line with the rest of the classes, and I think this design goal was met here. One final thing that I want to make very clear is that while I am very much in favor of the overall design direction of changing Divine Smite, I don't think that it was necessarily done in the best way. If they wanted to commit to it being a once per round effect, I think they should have just done that. Make it a once per round effect. Because now, since it's a spell, it can also be counterspelled, which feels kind of at odds with the purpose of it, being some sort of holy and divine energy that is imbued into you and your weapon. And again, like I said before, it also means that you can't use it as a reaction, which again doesn't really make any sense since the feature is literally described as saying you've mastered the art of using your divine energy. So to reiterate, while I do think that the overall design goal of trying to make it a once per round effect has been met and will end up achieving the desired result, I'm just not so sure that they did it in the best way possible. Moving on from Smite, I should also mention that Paladin no longer has a smaller curated list of fighting styles. This is because fighting styles are now feats, so they have access to all of them, and they're also getting access to weapon masteries. Next up is Channel Divinity, which is seeing a big improvement. In 2014, Paladins only ever maxed out at one use of their Channel Divinity, even at 20th level, which was honestly crazy to me. Now, when you gain access to the feature at 3rd level, you immediately gain 2 uses of it, and that increases to 3 uses at 11th level. You also regain 1 use on a short rest and all uses on a long rest. This will allow Channel Divinity to feel so much more useful, as before it always had the downside of being so limited that you often never wanted to actually use it in fear of it not being able to be used at the right time. Divine Sense has also been moved into Channel Divinity and now requires your bonus action to activate. The feature has got an upgrade in that it now lasts for 10 minutes rather than 1 round, and now it seems to work even if the creature is behind full cover, which is a big improvement. I don't mind that it's being tied to Channel Divinity now, since at least you get more uses of the feature, and it also means 1 less thing to track usages of, even though you basically never used it before. More importantly though, the duration increases to 10 minutes, which makes this so much more functional during social situations, which I love. At 5th level, Paladins gain their Faithful Steed feature, which essentially lets them always have the Find Steed spell prepared. You also get the ability to cast it once per long rest without expending a spell slot. Again though, like with Divine Smite, it is worth pointing out that anytime you utilize a free cast, it's being cast at the lowest possible level. The reason this is particularly relevant is that now, Find Steed, instead of just relying on other existing animal stat blocks in the game, now works off of a template and scales with the level that you cast the spell at. Anyone who knows my channel knows that I love creature templates, and I think this one is okay. It feels a bit bland and weak, but maybe it's received a buff since the UA was shown, I don't know. Some of the cooler abilities like being able to fly are gated behind casting it at least 4th level, which means that you won't be able to do that until you're at least 13th level, and given that the Paladins just doesn't have access to all that many spell slots, I feel like most will just end up using this with the free cast, which just isn't all that great. At 6th level, Paladins unlock their Aura of Protection, and though we don't get any confirmation about how it works or any of the wording, what we do know is that the concept behind the auras just all being combined into one, with increasingly powerful effects, is being moved forward from the playtest. I'm a big fan of this. It was always a bit messy having different auras with different sizes active, and this streamlines that. This also introduces a new keyword for areas of effect known as Emanation, which is essentially just anything that resembles an aura that radiates out from the person. Presumably, even monsters with the if you begin your turn within X feet type abilities will have this condensed into Emanation. This is a great move for clarity and saving space. At 9th level, Paladins get a new Channel Divinity option called Abjure Foes, which lets them target a number of creatures up to their Charisma modifier within 60 feet and subject them to a Wisdom saving throw, or have both the Dazed and Frightened condition for up to a minute or until they take any damage on a failed save. Now, we haven't seen the actual text here, so I am curious to know if the Dazed condition stuck around. I think this was a great addition to the game and does actually make this feature incredibly powerful in combat. No mention was made of the 14th level feature, Restoring Touch, but I have to say that I sincerely hope it survived playtesting, as it would mark exactly the 3rd way to remove the stun condition in the game, in addition to Wish and the 6th level Way of Mercy Monk's Physician's Touch feature. So please, either keep this around, provide other ways of removing the stun condition, or just get rid of stunned entirely. Moving on to the subclasses, first up is Oath of Devotion. The big change here comes with the Sacred Weapon feature. This is still part of your Channel Divinity, however, activating it no longer requires an action, and in fact doesn't even require your bonus action, but instead it allows you to activate it as part of your attack action. This is a massive quality of life improvement. Before, if you actually wanted to use it, you were essentially sacrificing your first turn of combat or whichever turn you were engaging it on, mostly giving you the surprise condition just for a setup that would add a nominal amount of damage to your attack. Now, being able to activate it as part of the attack action means that you get to start attacking with it immediately, which is a big deal. There's still a choice that needs to be made in that you need to decide if you want to use your Channel Divinity now, but at least you have more of them, so it feels better than before, where maybe you did decide to use it, so you burned your whole turn and your only Channel Divinity only for a combat that had like 2 more rounds. This is a huge win. At 15th level, the old feature Purity of Spirit has been removed and replaced with Smite of Protection, which allows you, when you use your Divine Smite, to give your allies within your Aura of Protection the effects of half cover, which is +2 to your AC and Dexterity saving throws. This is very powerful, but only lasts until the start of your next turn, and only after you use your Divine Smite. If used at the right time or consistently enough, I think this can be incredibly powerful. What would be interesting to see is if the wording of this has changed from the previous playtest where any of the smite spells qualified to make it work. Jeremy Crawford here specifically says Divine Smite though. Finally, at 20th level, Holy Nimbus has also been improved to deal radiant damage to creatures within the effect equal to your proficiency bonus plus your charisma modifier, which will more than likely make it equal to 11, so it's marginally better than the 10 from before, and now it also grants advantage on saves made against fiends and undead. Additionally, it can now also be activated as a bonus action, which is a big deal since it does mean that the Devotion Paladin can now activate Holy Nimbus and Sacred Weapon on the same turn, but they'll no longer be able to smite on that same turn. On the Oath of Glory Paladin, there were not a ton of major changes presented. Firstly, the Peerless Athlete ability from Channel Divinity now lasts for 1 hour rather than 10 minutes, which is a big improvement as far as exploration is concerned. It being limited to 10 minutes was probably a bit too restrictive, and opening it up to a much larger duration can make this a lot more useful if you need one member of the party to scale something or move anything particularly heavy. I appreciate that even though it's a somewhat niche ability, they still look to make it more usable. The other big change comes to Aura of Alacrity, which makes it so that your allies will no longer need to start their turn within the radius of the aura to gain the benefit of the speed boost. Now they simply need to enter it at any point to get the boost of 10 feet. This makes the feature a lot more usable, and like I said in the fighter video, it creates greater opportunities for increased mobility on the battlefield, which is something that I am a big fan of. It can help to facilitate more dynamic and engaging fights, and I'm totally here for that. Next is the Oath of the Ancients. The first improvement it gets is to its Nature's Wrath ability for Channel Divinity, which has gone from being largely unusable to probably being reasonable consideration depending on the circumstance. The 2014 version of Nature's Wrath not only consumed your only use of Channel Divinity, but it also had a very small reach of just 10 feet, and then the creature could choose whether to make a Strength or Dexterity saving throw to avoid the effect of being restrained, and the feature could only target one creature. Now, assuming the wording from the playtest has gone through, it can target as many creatures as are within 15 feet of the paladin, and then they're forced to make a strength saving throw. No more choice here. This is a significant buff to the feature, and I am very happy to see it. I'm always a fan of features that give more dynamic control abilities rather than just more damage, as they encourage players and the DM to think about the battle in a much different way than just purely how many hit points something has. Aura of Warding at 7th level has received a change that is better in some circumstances and worse in others. The 2014 version of the feature allowed allies within the radius of the aura to have resistance to all damage from spells. This was obviously very powerful, but had no impact on damage from other forms of attacks. Now, however, Aura of Warding grants resistance to all 3 of Radiant, Psychic, and Necrotic damage, regardless of the source. This means that now, it doesn't matter if you took necrotic damage from a spell, a weapon attack, or other feature, you just have resistance to it. But it does mean that you won't have resistance to damage from that fireball coming at you. So you're sacrificing more resistances that originate from a limited scope in favor of fewer resistances that can originate from anywhere. I'm sure there will be a plethora of opinions on this, but I will say that I do like it, and there's a few reasons for that. So many monster stat blocks have been updated with new features and abilities that deal damage with things that aren't spells, even though they may even duplicate the text of spells. Spell attacks became the norm with Monsters of the Multiverse and will almost certainly be carried forward in the new Monster Manual. So while your instinct might say that this version is worse because spells more broadly covered a much wider possibility of damage, the reality is that the majority of damage dealing effects from creatures in modern books, even spell-like effects, are not from spells anymore, but rather from their spell attacks, which this new version protects against and the old one didn't. My gut tells me that I like this change, especially given the context of the change in monster design in recent years. Lastly, the 15th level feature, Undying Sentinel, has been updated so instead of bouncing back to 1 hit point when you fall unconscious, you now instead regain an amount of hit points equal to triple your paladin level, and you can only do this once per long rest. This means that at a minimum, you're regaining 45 hit points. I think this is a great move for obvious reasons. Yes, it makes you less likely to die, but I mean you're 15th level anyway, so it's already pretty hard to die. But more importantly, it allows you to derive actual value from the feature rather than just being resurrected to 1 and then immediately dying again. Probably at least. Probably more often. Finally, for the Oath of Vengeance Paladin, the Vow of Enmity option for Channel Divinity has been changed in the same way that Sacred Weapon was, in that it's now activated as part of the attack action rather than requiring a bonus action to use. This again just means that there is less setup and leaves your bonus action available for other things. Also, now when the target of your vow dies, you can transfer it to another creature in much the same way that you can with Hunter's Mark. The last feature they discussed is the 20th level feature, Avenging Angel. This has been updated so that it now requires a bonus action to activate, rather than an action, meaning that you can use it immediately on your first turn in combat, and the duration has been adjusted. However, I noticed that there is a mistake potentially in what Jeremy Crawford says at this portion of the video. He says it's been changed to last for 1 hour, however the 2014 version of the feature also lasts for 1 hour. This is confusing since he states that they increased the duration since it grants flight, and they want you to be able to use that to chase someone down or to get somewhere that you couldn't before, but the durations listed are the same. Though it's worth noting that in the last UA, it had a duration of 10 minutes, which actually is a significant decrease, so I'm not really sure what to make of this. It feels like it goes one of two ways. Either it's 10 minutes now or it lasts for the rest of the day or something, but time will tell. Lastly, on bonus actions, as you probably noticed, this is now a very competitive slot for Paladins. There's a lot going on and a lot of things that can be activated with the bonus action, whether that's various channel divinities, lay on hands, or even divine smite. What this means is that players will now have to make a significant choice about what to actually use with their bonus action. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I was totally in favor of making divine smite a once per round effect, but I do think that because it's a bonus action spell, it might end up creating even more problems and being less likely to be used, and potentially even negatively impact the very problem that it was trying to solve. That being that you're encouraged to use more other features for your class rather than just smiting. However, more often than not, it still seems like Divine Smite will be the best use of your bonus action, so you'll probably do that anyway. Overall, I think the changes to the Paladin are a mixed bag of good and bad. I'm largely in favor of the design direction that they took with the class, despite the fact that it means that some portion of the features are weaker than before, Smite in particular. From my perspective, it helps contribute to the overall health and relative balance of the game, and that it keeps the class more in line with everything else without losing a lot of the flavor of it. Though I do wish that Smite wasn't a bonus action spell.